Greetings, my name is Patrick Peterson, CEO and founder of Agari, and thanks for spending a few minutes to go through an interactive whiteboard session to understand the technical details behind Dmarc and how it's going to help solve some real business problems for you. So fundamentally, you would like everyone on the internet to trust your email messages that say it's from your government organization, your financial services company, your e-commerce company, your dating site. And of course, you wouldn't like anyone else on the internet to trade in your good name and defraud your customers and cause business issues for you. Conceptually, very simple. Let's just go identify all your legitimate messages, tell the receivers that those are legitimate ones, ignore the rest of them, and then everyone on the internet can trust your brand at the email channel. In reality, it's a lot more complicated than that. And let's look at the first reason, which is the organizational complexity of the email channel, which has been for many years the #1 barrier to adoption. So let's take a typical business. You probably have a lot of different sources of mail. For example, you might have many servers, which are your corporate mail. So this is a messaging system run by your messaging team. You've got lots of Outlook users, and when you send a message, it goes through these servers, and it actually gets sent out to the internet. Very simple. And if that was all there was to it, we would have solved this problem a long time ago. On the other hand, you might have a marketing team. And this marketing team might have one or more services, vendors, or cloud providers that are actually sending promotional messages and other kinds of marketing messages to your users. But wait, there's more. You probably have a customer support organization. And in addition, you probably have a cloud provider which is also doing surveys that are actually surveying your users on their experience or what's happening. And I'll stop here on the whiteboard, but nowadays you might have talent recruiting firms, you might have payroll benefits firms, you might have health insurance benefit firms, you might have a 401k firm, and all of them are out there sending mail, and nowadays most of them are structured in the cloud to actually purport to be you. Your employees, your customers, they don't really care if it's a cloud provider. It's a message that's sent on your behalf, and they want to know it's actually coming from you, regardless of where it is. And so what's happened is, as there's been this explosion of cloud services, there's this host of problems which are, how can I actually ensure that even I know all my sources of mail, let alone I can have everyone on the internet know all those sources of mail? And that has been a major sticking point. And for many organizations, they've never been able to actually bring into compliance a survey and an inventory of all these sources of mail, so they've never been able to actually track their legitimate mail to actually figure out who the bad guys are. And that's been one of the first problems that Dmarc has set out to solve. So in this environment, we have all these organizations sending through the internet, and of course there may be many more, and of course this is going to a host of internet receivers. These could be your business partners, this could be consumer ISPs like a Gmail, a Yahoo Mail, a Hotmail, but this is the flow of messages and this is how they work. Where does the problem come from? Well, a simple example is that you might have a new organization who decides, we would really like to survey our customers. And so that Survey Prime organization comes out and starts sending lots of messages. And they start flying around the internet, but in reality, perhaps you're a financial services organization and surveying customers through certain regulated channels is not okay, but this entity didn't know that. Or you may have issues that the survey is unusual and uses unusual terms and brands because they're not part of the overall corporate process. And so your support organization, the phone may start ringing when people call up and say, I got this message, it asked me to click on a link, but I don't actually know if it's real. And you, in fact, don't know that it's real because somebody somewhere around the world just started sending messages through this email channel. That's one example, but an even worse example is that you can have some hackers or other criminals who simply compose 1,000, 1,000,000, or 100 million messages, and they simply purport to be from you. It says it's from you, they may copy your logo, they may copy your marketing materials, and they just fire those messages right to your users. And again, email's not authenticated. There's no way for the user to know, did that really come from you or not, at least not before Dmarc. And as a result, you have fraud, you have them calling up the support organization, you have regulators looking into things, you have front page news stories because there's no way to control this email channel. And that's the problem that Dmarc was designed to solve. The second challenge that Dmarc needs to solve is the scale problem. And let me walk you through that right now. So we talked a minute ago about an organization that has a complicated sending environment, but in reality, the internet is a much bigger place than just that one organization. It comprises thousands of those organizations. So let's walk you through that. Over here, we have that sender one. And again, that's the organization we talked about a minute ago, which can have many, many sources of mail in many, many different complex businesses and geographies. But beyond that, we know that that business might have a peer, which would be sender two. And in reality, there might be thousands and thousands and thousands of these businesses making up all the senders on the internet, and that could number as many as 10 million. 10 million businesses, each one of them having their own tremendous complexity of a sending environment, each one of them, of course, using the important internet to send mail, and each one of them, in turn, sending mail to many, many, many different internet receivers. So receiver one might be Yahoo, receiver two might be Microsoft, receiver three might be Yahoo, all the way to receiver N. And there are also on the order of 10 million internet receivers out there. And so if you look at the challenge here of this massively scalable problem, somebody's got to figure out all these senders with all their complexity, sending to all these receivers with all their complexity. And we're talking about millions of servers, billions of messages, and over here, billions of users and hundreds of billions of messages. How do we actually make sense out of this? And this is what Agari was focused on enabling, and this is what the Dmarc standard is really key to. And so what we have up here actually is the Agari Big Data Solution. And what it does is it actually takes data from all those receivers, and it actually transforms that data into global visibility of what's really happening with all these organizations. So now if you need visibility, you don't have to go do some forensic survey project of everyone in your company and hope that everyone's on top of it. You can simply say the Dmarc standard enables me to collect data via Agari from all these receivers, and that actually enables me to understand what's happening in my environment. And that could be those rogue sources we talked about who are surveying my customers. It could be the criminals and real-time data on what the criminals are doing for threat response, and a whole host of other things that provides that visibility. And so this problem of scaling to millions of senders and millions of receivers is what Agari's business is, and Dmarc is so critical to being able to make that happen. We've talked about the challenge of visibility, the challenge of scale, and now let me walk you through how the Dmarc actually solves those issues, as well as a multitude of others. And in order to do so, we've actually got to go back to the beginning, and back to the underlying email technology. So SMTP was the 1982 invention that is actually how we send and receive email. And as we've discussed, it doesn't have authentication. No way to know who really sent you that message. No way to truly take responsibility for it if you're the sender. Now, in 2002, there was a wonderful technology invented that's called SPF. Sender Permitted From is the acronym, and it actually enables the sender to take some responsibility for a message. And it's known as a path-based technology. What do we mean by path-based? The concept is that the sender of the message actually publishes a list of allowed sources, servers or IP addresses, and when the receiver gets the message, it checks with the sender and says, who's your allowed list of sources? And then they also check, did the path the message take originate at one of those allowed sources? If so, it's trustworthy. If not, it's not. And that's SPF, and again, it's been around for about a decade. In addition, we have DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail, and it's a signature-based technology. And that means that each message is individually signed, not by the sender, but by the gateway, and then that signature then is inspected using standard PKI signature technology, verified by the recipient to determine did the sender really send that. And those are the two technologies that have existed between 2009 and 2011, which have been attempts to actually address the problem at hand. Now, the issue, though, is that from the other sessions we've talked about here, how do you scale that? How do you add trust? And how do you actually get to the point where the sender has visibility? Those have been the major things which Dmarc has walked through. And so in the next section, I'm actually going to walk you through how Dmarc incorporates these two underlying technologies and then how it actually solves the problems that we've walked through today. Now let's wrap up and walk you through the four underlying ways that Dmarc punches through the technical challenges and provides the solution we've been talking about. So the first and one of the most important Dmarc breakthroughs is visibility. We've talked about how critical this is, and Dmarc actually provides the ability for a sender of internet mail to simply publish a DNS record or contact a provider like Agari and immediately have global visibility into how the email channel is being used and abused. Something that we've dreamed of for many years and something which is now standardized as part of Dmarc. Without that visibility, it's impossible to manage what you can't actually measure. The second thing that Dmarc has a huge breakthrough for is reliability. And we talked before about the two solutions, SPF and DKIM, both wonderful components, but the reality is that the two of them together are far more reliable than any one of them independently. And so we find that Dmarc builds upon the SMTP, SPF, DKIM stack to incorporate them together, and each one of the error cases for SPF and DKIM are complementary, and therefore the overall reliability of the system is driven down tremendously. And so now, instead of having to discuss SPF versus DKIM, how do they work, which one should I use, which one is better for what, we now have Dmarc, which basically incorporates the two of them together and drives up the reliability tremendously. The third, and one of the most important things, is scale. And the internet is an incredibly complicated, messy place. Without a standard like Dmarc, it's just impossible to exchange all this big data and know things are working. But by having the industry luminaries get together and spend literally 3 years of prototype deployment followed by 18 months of documentation and standardization, we now have the ability for all of these things to flow seamlessly and to know that the reliability and scale is where it needs to be. And the fourth item, which is so critical, is identity. And the reality here is that email is a rather messy protocol. And in fact, inside of email messages, you can have many different identities. So for example, when you walk up to fly internationally, if your passport says Patrick Peterson and your boarding pass says John Doe, they're not going to let you on that flight. But we've solved that problem by telling people they've got to be aligned. That's actually the same problem we've faced in email since it was originated. There's a sending identity in the envelope, there's a sending identity in the message, there's a from header, there's a reply to, there's technical identities that are deep inside the SPF and DKIM standard, and historically, there's been no requirement for those to match. So what do you do if you see a message that has 5 different identities, some of them are trustworthy, some aren't? It's a no-op, you just can't do anything with it. And what Dmarc has done is it's actually standardized on the from identity. This is the from header that you actually see in every message, and it's made clear that's the identity that everything has to align with. And that's allowed us to basically take this technology stack and have it really work because we're keen on one identity, and also, which is great news, that's actually the identity the user sees in their mail client, which even can drive more trust there. And in closing, let me offer you a few tips if you want to take advantage of this technology and if you want to be part of the solution to making the internet and your customers a safer place. So the first thing you can do is see how other people have done it. Come to the Agari website and take a look at the JP Morgan ISE case study where they won a fantastic award, really walking through how they deployed this and the business benefits they got as recognized by an industry group called ISE. The second thing you can do is get started. Publish a Dmarc record. Come to the Agari site and we'll actually walk you through how to publish a record, and you can either have that data, the visibility data, go to yourself and fill up your inbox with millions and millions of gigabytes and megabytes of data, or you can point that to Agari and take advantage of the Agari platform to get a quick start in actually taking advantage of Dmarc. Also, you can come to our site and get a lot more resources on the industry, the technology, and how it works. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible for people to really take advantage of the last decade of work and the breakthrough technology we have today.